EACC Math Lesson number 3, Adding and Subtracting Fractions and Mixed Numbers. I know a lot of you, just like the little dog here, have trouble with fractions. But today we're just going to do a quick review of how we add and subtract. Okay, remember your first key is before you can add or subtract, you need to have a common denominator. In other words, the bottom number has to be the same in all the fractions. So we've got two examples here. The first one we're adding. As you can see, the denominators are the same, 5 11ths plus 2 11ths. You simply combine the numerators then, and you end up with 7 11ths. Same thing with the subtraction problem, 5 11ths take away 2 11ths. You simply combine the numerators as long as you have a common denominator, and your answer stays with that same denominator. And we'll always reduce if possible, but neither one of these reduce. Okay, so what do we do if there's different denominators? Well, what we want to find is what's called the least common denominator, which is the least common multiple of the numbers. So when I think of multiples of 4, for example, I think of 4, I think of 8, 12, 16, 20, 24, and so on. For 5, I've got 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, and so on. Well, if you noticed, both of them had a common multiple of 20, and that's the smallest common multiple. That's our least common denominator then. Okay, so we need to change both of these fractions so that there's something over 20. Okay, all right, well, to get this first fraction 3/4 as a 20th, we had to multiply the 4 with 5, so you do the same thing to the to the numerator, multiply it by 5 also. So we end up with 15/20. For the second fraction 1/5, we had to multiply the 5 times 4, so we do the same thing to the numerator, and so we end up with 4/20. Adding these together now, I end up with 19/20, and that does not reduce at all. Okay, 5/8 take away 1/3. Well, again, we're subtracting, so we need that common denominator. Multiples of 8 are 8, 16, 24, 32, and so on. Multiples of 3 are 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18, 21, 24, and so on. If you notice, both of them had a common multiple of 24, which was the least common multiple. Now notice, you can always find a common multiple by multiplying the two denominators together. It may not be the smallest one, okay? That's okay, you just have to do some reducing in the end. Alright, so let's convert both of our fractions to 24ths. So I've got something over 24 minus something over 24. Okay, so the first fraction, we're multiplying it by 3 on the bottom, so we do the same thing to the top, so that's 15/24. Second fraction, we had to multiply it by 8 to get our 24, so we do the same thing to the numerator, so that's going to be 8/24. Now we can subtract. 15 take away 8 is 7, so we end up with our answer of 7/24. And again, we'll check to see if that reduces, and it does not reduce any further, so we're good. Okay, here we have a couple of mixed numbers. Alright, when you're dealing with mixed numbers, there's several things, you have several options. You can leave them as a mixed number, you can turn them into improper fractions. When I'm adding, I'm just going to leave these both as mixed numbers. I see here my common denominator is going to be 8, so the first one actually stays the same, 2 1/8. The second one, the 1 stays the same. To make this an 8, I had to multiply the 2 with a 4, so I do the same thing to the numerator, multiply it by 4, so we end up with 4/8. So, combining the whole numbers, 2 plus 1 is 3, 1/8 plus 4/8 is 5/8, and that doesn't reduce or simplify any further, so we're done with this one. All right, 4 and 1/6 take away 1 and 3/4. Okay, with this one, my common denominator is going to be 12s. Now, watch what happens with this one. When I turn this into 12, I get 4 and 2/12. Take away 1 and 9/12. All right, I can't subtract 9/12 from 2/12. I'm not going to get a negative here. So one way to handle this is what's called borrowing. I'm going to borrow 1 from that 4, make it a 3. And the one I borrow, I want to be able to combine it with the 2/12, so I'm borrowing it as 12/12. So now my new mixed number is 3. I had 2/12 there, I borrowed 12 more 12s, so that's going to give me 14/12. Take away 1 and 9/12. Alright, now we can subtract. 3 take away 1 is 2. 14/12 take away 9/12 is 5/12, and that doesn't reduce any further. Okay, excuse me, so that's the method of borrowing. Okay, so again, we want to subtract. We have a mixed number and a fraction. So we're going to create a common denominator. So in this case, we're going to use 7 and 5, so that's going to be 35. So the first one becomes 3 and 20 over 35, multiplying it by 5, minus 28 over 35. All right, I go to subtract. Remember, you may have to borrow. Well, I'm going to have to borrow here because I can't subtract 28/35 from 20/35. So again, the process, I'm taking 1 away from the 3, so that now becomes a 2. The one I'm borrowing, I want to add it to 20/35, so I'm going to borrow it as 35/35. So now I have 2, and instead of 20/35, I'm going to combine that with my 35/35, so I have 55/35. Take away 28/35. Now we can subtract. I still have my 2 there, and 55 take away 28 is going to be 27, and that's over 35, and that doesn't reduce any further, so we'll leave that as it is. Okay, so let's add and subtract the following. Again, if your teacher wants to turn this off and let you try these 3 on your own at first, go ahead and do that right now, and I'll work through them here in a second. Okay, first problem, I'm going to use 14ths as my common denominator. So the first one I had to multiply it by 2, so that's 4/14, and the second one I had to multiply by 7, so that's going to become 7/14. And again, I combine the numerators, so that's going to give me 11/14, and that doesn't reduce. Next one, I'm going to change these into 12s, so that's going to be 3 and 9/12. Take away 1 and 4/12. I didn't have to borrow in this case. I can subtract the 1 from the 3, so I get 2, and 4/12 from 9/12 is 5/12. And the last one we'll convert to 8s, so that's going to give me 2 and 2/8, take away 1 and 5/8. Alright, so here's my problem. I can't subtract 5/8 from 2/8, so I'm going to borrow 1 from the 2. And the one I'm borrowing, since I want to add it to 2/8, is in the form of 8/8. So now I have 1 and 10/8. Take away 1 and 5/8. Well, 1 take away 1 is 0, so I have no whole number left. And 10/8 take away 5/8 is simply 5/8. Okay, that's the end of this presentation. If you have any questions,